There are several ways to bulk load data into CrateDB. In this video, I'll walk you through the different options and we'll look at a few ways to create records with the insert statement. We'll also briefly consider the options available for bulk data export from CrateDB. CrateDB accepts bulk data imports from a variety of sources. You can use a local file, import data from a URL, or connect to the popular Amazon S3 or Azure storage container services. Let's explore these beginning with the CrateDB cloud interface, then with the copy from SQL statement. Finally, we'll learn how to populate a table in CrateDB by selectively copying data from an existing table. Before importing data, we first need to create a table. This SQL statement creates a table to hold details of Chicago's taxi fleet. And this file contains the fleet data in CSV format. Moving to the Import tab, we can see our import options. We're going to import from a file, but let's first look at some of the other options available to us. We can choose a URL or an S3 bucket, or we can import from Azure. In the case of Azure and S3, we can provide the appropriate secrets as necessary. Returning to the File tab, I'm going to drag and drop the file onto this area, and you'll see that CrateDB's interface has inferred the file type. We can select other supported file types, and we can also choose whether or not the file is gzip compressed. Next, we need to provide a table name to import the data into. In our case, it's taxis. We're all ready to go, so we'll click the import button here